This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska. And a big welcome back to everybody out there in audio podcast land, whether you're watching us on YouTube or streaming us through your favorite audio platform. We appreciate you taking us along for the ride on this beautiful fall day. Or maybe you're listening to us in your office or at home, and we appreciate that too. We've got kind of a almost full Hunt Nebraska cabin today. We've stole Julia Plugi from She Goes Outdoor podcast. If you haven't heard that, you're going to want to check that out. That's available on all the platforms as well.
It is.
You kind of led the way, and we kind of followed.
I'm glad I did the work for you.
Whatever they succeeded with, we stole here at Hunt Nebraska.
Yep. Took me months to figure it out, and took you 2 hours to read my directions.
Exactly. The copy and paste. We've got our good friend from the National Wild Turkey Federation in studio as well, behind the boards, mission control as it were, Michael Addison.
Running all the sliders and switches.
Me, just Hershy here, just to get things kind of kicked off. It's been kind of an interesting start to the fall season, I'd say. I have not been out near as much as I'd like to have been at this point. You guys been out much?
No. Well, I guess, yeah, I guess I was.
You probably more than the rest of us.
As a mentor, not necessarily the hunter itself, but I was mentoring.
Well, tell us about that.
So,
you gotta live vicariously.
Yeah, last weekend we did a ladies learned a pheasant hunt down at Cub Creek, and that's by Beatrice. And then we spent some time on the Beatrice gun range too. So 10 ladies that either has just pheasant hunted a little and need a lot more experience, or had never pheasant hunted or hunted in general, had joined us there. And we did some shotgunning skills, some hunter safety, and then spent the evening together in a really cool bed and breakfast that's in Odell, Nebraska. And then we traveled back up to Beatrice and spent the morning hunting. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of walking. You failed to remember until about October time frame that you should have been working out until leading into October for pheasant hunting, but good times.
Well, that's part of the hunting tradition, I think, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next year I'm going to get in shape.
Yeah.
And if you do get in shape, then you kind of ruin that tradition of the next fall saying,
right,
boy, this is a lot of work to have fun. We got to get back in shape. So it's kind of become a tradition to
What's
to
come to tradition now is, did you remember your ibuprofen? Check. Took it. Yeah. And that was the conversation among us mentors that age every year we go on this. We're like, yep, check, got the ibuprofen.
The pheasant hunter's toolkit at the top is ibuprofen.
Yes.
It definitely helps, and be proactive in that, folks. Start it before you start the walk.
Yes.
To say the least. But that's kind of cool. And that was just right after the annual big Becoming Outdoors Women.
Yeah. So we had the main weekend, and 92 ladies were with us out there at Fort Robinson State Park. Gorgeous weekend. Like, we've had the most amazing weekends in that hit the spot down there, and ladies that had never traveled that part of the state before. We even had maybe 8 ladies that were out of state. They came in from California to even from Baltimore.
That one blows my mind.
Yeah.
3-day
And she drove all the way to Nebraska for our Becoming Outdoor Woman program.
Yep. Just an absolute blast out there, to say the least. And that's kind of cool. And now you're taking it to that beyond step. Because that Becoming Outdoors Woman weekend, always the first weekend in October.
It is.
And then you've got those more intimate one topic, deep dive into it over the weekend, or a full day in some cases. But you've got a lot of those coming up in the hunting field.
We do. I mean, you, Aaron, you're going to be with a group out for a goose hunt coming up here quickly. We got a couple deer hunts prepped. So, yeah, it's the fall is busy, but it's a good busy.
Yeah. Well, and I can't believe we're this far into October. I mean, we're closer to November, let's face it, folks, than we are October. This is the time of year we dream about, and it's already flying by.
Yeah. And I don't, is it the weather? I don't know.
It's just been way too warm.
Absolutely.
I'd say overall. Yeah, I'd agree. And you're starting to, and we have seen some color in certain spots of the state. Some areas probably more moisture has probably helped a little bit out west. I know drought conditions oftentimes, or dry conditions oftentimes heighten the color here on the eastern side of the state, but we've had some wind and whatnot. But it's amazing how fast things slip by now. Michael, have you been out much at all?
I tagged along with a buddy for some archery deer this past weekend, but again, too many leaves.
Too many
warm.
leaves, yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. So
feels like you're kind of enclosed right now.
Yeah, haven't done a lot. So
well,
I actually have a picture from this time last year, and it was comparing it to, I guess this weekend it was comparing it to the woods, and yeah, way more leaf cover this year than it was last year. Wow. Last year there was already quite a few leaves had fallen down, and it was a lot easier to see.
Because I know in some of the parts that I bow hunt last year, that leaves seemed to hang on, and I was complaining about that. But maybe it's just something I complain about every year now.
Yeah, true.
Probably so.
Didn't even realize. But as we get closer to the end of the month, I know a lot of archers are going to be out there chasing deer as the rut starts to show more and more activity in our woods and fields, which is exciting for a lot of deer hunters, obviously. But I got to tell you, well, a couple of things. One is sometimes I felt like we were just kind of misled as we were younger. When we were kids, there were certain things that I thought or came to believe because of how much adults talked about them and told us about them that we'd encounter more often than I'd have in adult life. There's other things that I wish they would have prepared me better for. I mean, I think there needs to be a college level course on passwords for your online presence and apps and all that type of stuff. They never once trained us on how to create passwords and what's good and what's not good or strong, or more importantly, how to remember the dang things without writing them down and kind of defeating the whole purpose of
that's what all those brain exercises
to
supposed
have
to be
them.
for.
Yeah.
As long as no one goes to my hard drive and ever searches the word password, where I've got a spreadsheet full of them, I'll be good.
I have a spot too that they're all saved, and if that spot goes down some way, ooh.
Yeah. Well, one of those things that we were taught as kids, and Julia, Michael's probably not old enough to remember all
He's
this
just
stuff.
a baby.
In case you catch on fire, what are you supposed to do?
Stop, drop, and roll?
Yes, stop, drop, and roll. And I don't know why, but in elementary school, we learned that over and over and over. I think the teachers just kind of had fun as like, watch this at recess, watch this. Hey, guys, what do you do when you're on fire? Stop, drop, and roll. Yeah. I thought I'd be on fire a lot more by now.
Yeah,
in my adult
I don't think
life.
they teach that anymore, do
no, they do, but I think it's a lot more.
Well, clearly I'm not that young to not have been taught it anymore, so...
I was going to say, we're just not bursting into flames like they must have in that generation.
No. They have their clothing is more fire retardant.
Grandpa always says that he walked up and down a hill going to school and 3 miles of snow, and he forgot to mention he was always on fire when he did it too. So he had to stop, drop, and roll.
But that one, to be truthful, folks, I am happy that we're not on fire as often as I thought we might be. But another one is this time of year. I mean, hey, we're coming to one of it's the second most popular holiday to decorate for. Halloween.
I love it. I love decorating for Halloween.
And, I just loved it as a kid, being able to dress up. I was a football player or a pirate. It seemed like they kind of swapped every other year, depending on what I wanted to do. A couple of vampires in there, perhaps, as well. But watching all the TV shows and even some of the movies, I thought there'd be a lot more, Halloween masquerade parties as an adult. I really thought so.
Yeah. I think there are out there. They're just not in our little world.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
We're not popular enough to invite?
I don't think so. I mean, I see on Facebook. I see people that I follow on Facebook. They've been part of the parties, but I get to play farmer every day.
I might not only not be cool enough, but I'm not seeing those in my social media feed. So I might have to look those up. But I figured it'd be cool. I figured my costumes would get better and better to where they're darn near Hollywood level. Type stuff for, feature film. But you guys have any Halloween parties you're going to be part of? Any masquerade, any dress up times?
No.
No.
I'm not a Halloween fan.
Really?
No.
Not into the candy and all that stuff?
My Halloween tradition is turkey hunting. I'll usually be out fall turkey hunting. In Missouri, it's traditionally the last day of the season. So,
okay.
So that's usually whenever I'm out, last ditch effort to try and get a fall bird, but of course, in Nebraska, I've got a little more time.
You do,
but I'll still be turkey hunting.
That's a good thing to be chasing. I've seen a few of those out there. Julia, you got anything planned?
I'm sure we'll be taking the kiddos trick or treating. We might still be recovering from this coming weekend's adventures to Kansas City, but it's just trick or treating. And I like to go out a little bit more than my mom did. So my mom would just, what's your favorite kind of candy? She'd buy me the candy. Like, here, now I don't have to take you out anymore. At least with
that strategy.
You take the kids out. When they get home, you shove them in bed on a sugar high, and then you hide the Almond Joys and the Snickers and the M&Ms, and then that pile just
I'll have to
disappears.
find that out. My sister, my younger sister, she was the one that had the first grandkid for my parents, and he got spoiled to say the least. But he loved dressing up for Halloween. He loved going trick or treating, and luckily he was cute enough at the age when he started trick or treating and really got into it that the people that he'd get candy from could handle his comments. And they weren't mean or anything, but he'd go up to the door, just a big smile. He was dressed like a cowboy. He'd go up there and trick or treat, and they'd toss in, like you said, candy. But, oh, look at that cowboy! You're so cute, all this and that. And he'd look at it and like, chocolate, and he'd just drag himself down the sidewalk, hoping the next house wouldn't have it. He still to this day does not like chocolate.
Wow.
Oh, really?
So my sister loved,
and he's
Halloween.
related to you.
He's related to me. He's got a sweet tooth. It's just not for
chocolate.
So all the other things, Smarties and whatnot, a lot of things that most trick or treaters probably don't look forward to. He did. He enjoyed it, and those houses just were excited when they hey, I got toothpaste. Look at that. But
I do have a bone to pick with the candy companies. They're starting to put like Reese's, or maybe it's a Kit Kat, inside of this, like the mixed bags with Skittles and Strawbers.
Oh.
So you know what that Reese's cup is starting to taste like?
Oh, no. Fruity?
Fruity.
That's wrong.
No,
that's wrong on many levels.
No, they have got to be separated.
So you kind of tipped your hand there a little bit. Your favorite trick or treat candy, Julia, is
the Almond Joy.
See, and that's one of my least.
Yeah,
I
you don't like the coconut.
I don't do, but Almond Joy. It's got to have the almonds in it.
Yep, and that almond's getting smaller. The coconuts, like everything, is just getting smaller. It's so depressing. So you got to have two.
Is that that dark chocolate or is that milk chocolate?
That's milk.
That's
now they
milk
do
chocolate.
have. Is it
both.
Mounds? I think is it Mounds or one of them.
Mounds has dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? The
I
one
thought
without
Almond Joy
almonds?
did too, but maybe just Mounds.
See, I think it's one or the other. Yeah, I could be wrong. What's your favorite?
Paydays.
Paydays. Now that's different.
I love me a good payday.
It's typical. It's a little healthier.
I mean, you got peanuts in there, so some protein. I do.
And
when it comes to candy, I really don't discriminate. I'd probably say my top three are Paydays, Nestle Crunch bars, and then a good old Hershey's bar.
When I was growing up, it was probably a toss-up. There was a lot of them that I liked, and it's almost like bacon. There was candy bars that I wouldn't pick if I went to the store to buy something, but I just loved eating them anyway. Baby Ruth, Snickers was one of that. Milky Way is probably my top as a kid, but definitely now, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
The white ones. We went
The
there
white
the other
ones,
day. Yes,
amen.
they have
Those
the
are
white.
good.
Oh, in the freezer.
And I don't know what it is, but the shapes, like the Reese's Peanut Butter pumpkin shaped ones, are better than the regular.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. And later on, the Christmas trees will be better.
And then
than
the eggs.
And then the eggs, the eggs for Easter.
I don't know what they do different.
More
but
peanut
they're
butter,
definitely better. But it's a lot of fun, and hopefully you get a masquerade or two in. If you guys are going that are listening to one of those and you want to invite us, feel free to drop that information down in the comment section, if you would, please. We won't ruin the whole party. We promise.
No. Just part of it.
But weird things happening out there in the woods, back in your old stomping grounds, in fact. Your home state, Michael.
Yeah, there's
some weird, freaky things going on.
That's a daily occurrence in the state of Missouri. That's not just this time of year.
Now, this article is actually dated October 3rd, so this was some time ago. So, listeners, you probably heard this, but an 18-point deer was harvested in the state of Missouri, which isn't necessarily, all that shocking. Other than it's a pretty impressive deer. If you haven't seen the picture of it, it was still in velvet, early enough that it was still in velvet. And then when they went to go field dress it, Julia, what did they find?
It was not a buck.
It was not a buck.
Huh.
It was an 18-point doe.
Oh, that takes me back.
Doe.
Takes me back to, was it Jackson?
Jackson Ellis, our former hunter ed coordinator. In fact, we were at Becoming an Outdoors Woman weekend. We were at beautiful Ponca State Park that time, when all of a sudden everybody in the office was at BOW that weekend, except for Jackson. And he was out hunting, and all of a sudden we got, what was it, a Snapchat or a video on text or something like that, and all of a sudden he sent all of us, hey, I got a big deer down. And we're like, yay for you, while we were working over here. and then we got video just like, and he's scanning down just like, oh, this is a nice deer. It's full of velvet, all that type of stuff. And boom, he kind of goes down. He's like, what? And he kind of spreads the back legs, and there's not the junk that's supposed to be there on a normal buck. And if I remember right, it wasn't fully female though either.
I don't remember now either.
We'll have to talk to Jackson. He actually got the folks, as you can imagine, he got that one to the taxidermist pretty fast, which he has on speed dial. They've kind of, exchanged Christmas cards now, I believe. But it was a neat deer. And I believe it kind of had unfunctioning female parts, but wasn't completely, I don't know how to say it quite. We'll have to ask him about that. But antler does are kind of unique.
Well, and the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure this is the second one in the last few years down there.
Oh, really?
Back home. I'm pretty sure I remember reading a story here a few years ago that somebody else farther south and down south in Missouri shot another antlered doe. I think it was only a 15-point antlered doe, though.
Only a 15.
Only a 15-point. only. But, I think this is the second time in the last few years that this has happened. So, and I know it's not a completely uncommon occurrence. You see, if you look it up online, you'll see stories from other states every once in a while about it. But it's definitely not your everyday experience in the woods.
This deer, according to this article, which is, I believe, from Field and Stream, I better give them their due. Yep, Field and Stream Online, Missouri. Hunter arrows incredible 18-point antlered doe, and the tagline below it is the unusual white-tailed deer is most likely hermaphrodite. It's a shocking trophy nonetheless, and it goes on to say that antlered does aren't common, and only a handful of impressive ones have been bagged in recent years. And it's likely this deer is not a true antlered doe, which usually have hard antlers, but a hermaphrodite, which exhibit velvet-covered antlers akin to that of a crypto or something buck. I won't be able to say it. The opposite. So that's kind of unique, to say the least. Would be kind of shocking when you walk up on it. Now, I have actually seen on the hoof an antlered doe. I was working in a county park in eastern Iowa years and years and years ago, and I was on garbage can duty, which folks entailed making sure that I got to pick up everything that the raccoons the night before had scattered to the four corners.
Man, don't you just love that?
And I was on an old Cushman cart, and I was getting ready to leave, and something just popped out across the gravel road in front of me. I kind of slowed down, and it was a nice antlered deer. And I could tell it was just looked out of place. It really kind of looked different. And later on, I was telling some of the other guys that work there full time, hey, I just saw an antlered doe. And they looked at me just like, antlered doe? Yeah, how could you tell it was an antlered doe? How close were you?
That's what my question is.
20
like,
30
how could
years.
you tell?
Well, and I told them, because right behind it popped out a fawn, and they walked right up in the middle of the road, stopped, and she started nursing.
How cool
and
is
it
that?
was just like, so I figured it was a doe. And that's probably the only time I'd be able to tell that that's a doe and not a buck.
Well, I think antlered does. I think their antlers also look a little weirder than your typical. It's not your typical nice spread out main beam with your tines coming off. There's usually some clusters in there and other things.
Are they rubbing off the velvet? Like, does the velvet stay on?
In this case with a hermaphrodite or those what they call stags, when you got basically a male that gets castrated, they'll keep growing. They usually don't lose that. Now this here is saying that with an antlered doe, they'll usually turn into hard bone like a buck, and I've seen some of those where it has, and it sheds, and they have to regrow them each and every year.
And they do.
And they do to some extent, yeah. But you're right. They're generally, for the most part, do look a little bit different at times. But sometimes I also wonder if part of that is, like you said, just kind of the oddity to begin with, or we know that it is, and we kind of look at it through a little bit different eye. This one was in full velvet and had, like you said, a lot of different things going, so it probably didn't shed those antlers and probably didn't shed that velvet either.
I'd be curious if that hereditary passes down the line I would assume.
I would.
Yep, if you can breed. Now this one, hermaphrodites.
Well, that was going to be my question. My next question is, do they have the reproductive system to be working? And obviously, if she's got fawns on her.
And some of them do and some of them don't. In Jackson's case, I don't think did, but I could be misremembering that. So it just kind of depends. And obviously, a castrated male, not adding anything at that point. So interesting stuff. And antlers are one of those weird mysteries we still we know a bunch about, but they still kind of surprise us. It's one of those things, if a buck deer injures its back left leg, the right side of the antler might show some impacts next year. We had one, another spot that I worked on a lifetime ago. We had some captive deer, and he felt really, really big and strong because he was about the only buck in the whole pen filled with does. Until some wild white-tailed deer were able to get into the enclosure and just knock the snot out of him. And you could see that he wasn't learning his lesson, Julia, because every morning he'd walk out there and he'd be missing another tine off of his antlers. He went from a nice 9-pointer, 5 on one side, 4 on the other, to an 8, to a 7, to a 5. And pretty soon it was just main beam out there. And I kid you not, folks, for the next 3 years when he regrew his antlers, there was not a single tine on it. It was just brow tine, main beam, and that was it. And for some reason, by the time he turned, I think 5 or 6, then they started showing back up. But it's just kind of like, why?
I think I've read somewhere that trauma can cause a deer's antlers to grow differently. So we'd have to check with our biologist, of course, see if that's accurate.
Trauma causes us to have gray hair. Why wouldn't it bother their
Yeah. But that's just one of the cool things, and especially in our whitetail world, we've got some oddities, and I'm sure here in the state of Nebraska, we'll get to see some. Julia, you remember our good friend Dr. Dave Otis that worked in our wildlife division, folks. He was kind of a wildlife forensics expert before that whole CSI really got popular on TV in Hollywood. And he did time of death. He did what bugs showed up to a carcass, whether it was bird or mammal. At what points and at what stage the larval would emerge and, eggs hatch and all that type of stuff. He could tell ducks by the length of their sternum and even gendered at times. He was pretty darn impressive, but he kind of got to be known as the man that loved abnormalities. I mean, he did the whole slideshow. Did you ever get to sit on some of those?
I don't know that I have. I think I only sat through a part of it and oof, this is a lot.
Folks, he got to be known in the state of Nebraska as if you had some weird wildlife critter, and it happened more in our whitetail than just about anything else, he was the guy to get a hold of because he'd have an example, he'd have stories about it, he could probably tell you what it was. He had those deer that had the hoofs that would just keep growing. And the hooves would get so long that they'd start, there are 2 pieces in front and 2 in the back, but those 2 main hoof nails would keep growing. They start crisscrossing, and deer would have trouble walking. He had some deer that have manes, and we still see that from time to time. Mane almost like a zebra, not that color, but sticking up on the back of the neck like that. He had all sorts of stuff. And then it kind of went into some of the odd farm animals as well, because I know what he got famous for was a one-eyed horse.
Yeah,
a cyclops,
and there was some exotic fish that had been discovered in some community ponds that basically somebody had dumped in from the pet collection, and then somebody had caught it. Mm-hmm. What was it? It was something with the teeth. It was a fish with massive teeth, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was related to piranhas.
Yeah,
but it was the vegetarian.
Pacas? Are they called pacas, I think?
Yeah.
Maybe something along those lines.
Pacus, yep.
Pacus?
And so that was kind of neat, but it's kind of cool, especially as we get to Halloween to hear some of those things. We've got deer that are harvested each year that show remnants of fangs from an earlier time when deer and some of their ancestors needed to have stronger canine teeth than they do now, and those will pop out from time to time. And elk, sometimes those ivories are kind of a remnant of a past tooth as well, and those still exist in just about every elk. But deer, it's a lot more rare. So when you're all of a sudden, if you're cleaning one out and you take a peek and it's got an extra set of teeth, they do look kind of gnarly. I mean, they're a little bit more pointed and stuff, but cool stuff as we get into that Halloween time of frame. But one of the things we did want to talk about today is memories, because we are getting to that point. We've got some youth seasons going on still. We've got some new hunters hitting the fields, all that type. Do you guys remember your first time going deer hunting?
First time going deer hunting. I don't know that I do.
Really?
Actually. Yeah. Turkey hunting was a lot bigger for me growing up than deer hunting was necessarily. I could tell you about the first time I remember going turkey hunting.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah,
now I remember. I
do
remember, yeah. It was a good story because I was sitting on the top of a hill and I hadn't really, I was toward the top of a hill, kind of hidden back into some bushes and trees. And I could see a couple different directions, if the bucks were passing by. And I was literally at the top of the hill, but so I couldn't see at one point right in front of me. But I just remember this buck walking up, and he was probably between you and me, Harold.
Oh, my goodness.
5 feet. Because we both kind of, all of a sudden we both went, and I heard it go, it's like squeak as a buck, and then just ran and prancing away, and I'm like, I mean, that was buck fever, all right.
Yeah,
I didn't know buck squeaked.
That was a buck. Oh, there was a squeaking out of that buck. Needless to say, I didn't.
Next time you talk to somebody about deer hunting, go up to them and say, "Have you ever heard a buck squeak?"
There was a squeak.
You were close.
There was a buck squeak out of that. You see, when you tell a boy, "Oh, you screamed like a girl," he screamed like a girl.
I think my first memory of deer hunting was the first time I climbed a tree stand, and I think my dad listens to the podcast, so he'll have to tell me after he hears this episode if I'm recollecting this right. But I think it took me like 10 or 15 minutes to climb that tree stand because I am not a heights person, and he was behind me, and I'm fairly certain it took quite a bit of time for me to climb that tree stand. But
I'm with you. I've had to learn how to embrace heights, and thank goodness ladder stands were invented because it makes it a lot easier, and lifelines even more so that you can stay connected all the way up and down. And I often tell the story about the first time I bought a tree stand. It was a hang-on, fixed location, whatever you want to call it. And boy, I had to put stairs up, and I can remember where I was. You couldn't use the ones that screwed in, so you had to use these ones that would strap around the tree. And most of the times they worked, but every once in a while, about every fifth one you'd get, and you'd step on it, and it wouldn't hold your weight, and it'd just slide you down the tree again, which was kind of interesting because you're kind of hugging as you're going, and you're squeezing pretty tight. You're clenched all the way around. But finally got it up there, and I mean, I'm just shaking on there. I got my strap, and the safety systems weren't near what they are nowadays by a long shot, and get everything set up there. And I remember it bugged me that my father-in-law could stand flat-footed on the ground and basically touch my platform. It was just barely above his head. So now he's like 6'2", 6'3", which kind of made me feel better, but at the same time, just like, I'm not that high off that ground. People are talking going 12, 15 foot in the air, and I'm like 6. And I probably put myself more in the visual sight of those deer coming past than anything else. I remember my first deer hunt pretty vividly because deer, though I didn't hunt them for about 2 or 3 years after I got through hunter education, it was the whole reason I got into hunting was deer. Not because they just were this, I couldn't hardly, like you said, I didn't hear about buck fever at that time. Deer were just kind of cool, and I didn't pick them for any other reason than I heard you could get an entire week off of school to go deer hunting. And at the time I heard that, folks, I think I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. I thought, what'd be better than not having to come to school for a day? If I got to go hunting deer to do that, I guess I'll become a deer hunter. Now, my dad wasn't much of a deer hunter. He didn't really like that. He didn't grow up doing it. And so he didn't know much about it. He tossed out, you're too young. You got to go through hunter education before you get to go hunting, period, much less deer. I think he tossed that out there with the idea that in a year I'll forget it anyway and wouldn't have to do it. Because he hunted some as a kid, but as soon as he started having kids, he kind of gave up. He had other interests. And lo and behold, got into a hunter ed class. He talked me out of deer hunting. because he used to have to apply back then, and he just didn't know what to make of that. Talked me into bird hunting and that, and got that bug pretty quick for the next few years. But I remember going deer hunting. It was a cold December morning, and I was sitting in what we called the blind back then. It was basically spare pieces of plywood, kind of made like a box. Now, it wasn't really painted. It just was wood. It was kind of leaning against each other, and there was a 5-gallon bucket on the other side of that to sit on. And I remember sitting there, this is going to be impressive. There's going to be huge deer running all over the place and this and that. And I sat, folks, it felt like for a week straight, but it was like 60 minutes, and nothing was happening other than I was getting colder and colder and colder and colder. And pretty soon I was like, deer hunting sucks. This is who wants to sit out here and get cold? And I could see the car. I could see the old Pontiac Catalina sitting there, maybe 150 yards away, thinking, Dad left the keys in there, because he went someplace else. Parked one spot. I walked one way to the box. He walked just into the woods, probably sat by an old stump. But he left the keys in there. He said, in case you get cold. And I kept thinking, the keys are in there. Keys are in there.
Yeah.
Keys are in there. Keys in there. And just about the time I got up to move to go to the car, all of a sudden, bloop, out of the woods beside me popped like 3 big does. Oh. Now, they were monster. I mean, they have never made does bigger than these 3 deer right there. And we, like you said, Julia, we saw each other at about the same time.
Yeah. And
I just froze, and they froze. And I completely forgot I was deer hunting there for at least 5 minutes as we stared at each other and just like, uh-oh, what do I do?
Just scream,
Are they going to attack?
Like a girl?
If I got to attack, I got a gun. I can defend myself. And about the same moment, I'm sure it was just a few minutes, but at the same moment, we both realized that we weren't going to get anywhere just by having a stare down. So they take off just as soon as I realize, that's right, I got a gun in my hand. I'm deer hunting. And I missed them 4 times. and I was pretty good at math back then, realizing I brought 5 shells. That's all I got. I got 5 shells. So I thought, and I was catching out. I went from just frozen to the core. I mean, I
now sweating.
Yeah, it was just like, yeah, exactly. I was hot. I was warm. Like, oh my goodness. So I sat for a little longer. Nothing happened. I just kept thinking, what are the chances I actually have another deer walk out and I shoot it, because I got 1 shell left after missing those others 4 times. And so that car, I started cooling off again as adrenaline wears off, and you almost get chillier. And I finally decided I got to go back for more ammo. And car's warm. There's more ammo in there. I'm walking back. And so I start walking. I get halfway to the car, and all of a sudden another deer pops out and looks at me. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, what do I do now? Now this time I was a little more stealthy about it, and I slowly came around and came up on it, and it didn't move until right when I pulled the trigger. And it ended up being my first deer harvested. I didn't know it at the time. I was still too cold and excited and shaking and out of ammo now. And luckily I connected, because there wasn't any more shotgun shells, because I was in a shotgun only zone.
I was going to say, okay, yep.
Back in the car. So Dad said there were, but he must have taken them all, or we just miscounted or left them on the kitchen table.
And you couldn't call them on your cell phone.
But oh my goodness, it was exciting. I remember going home, and Dad had never gutted a deer before. So we went and got a neighbor, a guy that worked for him, to help out. And my brother's there. I can remember him at the kitchen table there. We had a TV nearby it, and he's in his underwear. It's Saturday morning. He's watching cartoons, and he's eating cereal. Like, you guys get anything? and I was like, yeah, I got one. Oh, that's too bad. Maybe next time. And he stopped. And look, he's later on in life, he said, I was used to you guys going hunting all the time and not shooting anything. That I just assumed. He said no. So he got excited, and we went and found that big doe. But that was my first deer hunt, and for about 5 or 6 years in a row after that, I swore off deer hunting, because it was a cold sport.
Yeah,
so
it gets cold, especially in eastern Iowa that time of year.
It was chilly. But you said turkey hunting. You remember that more than you do your deer hunts.
Yeah, mine and my dad's big thing growing up was turkey hunting.
Oh, that's cool.
So I can tell you, I doubt it was my first turkey hunt, but it's my first memory of turkey hunting. And apologies in advance to my father, but it's my favorite story to bring up, and it's not one of his most shining moments in the turkey woods. But we were out hunting one of his buddies' places, and it's me and my dad and my brother at the time still went with us. he fell off later in life, thought it was too boring because there for a stretch when we first started hunting, we never really seemed to get anything, didn't have much luck seeing anything or harvesting anything. So he's like, this is boring. And he quit hunting and pursued other interests. But no, we're sitting there and we got a hen decoy sitting out there probably about 25, 30 yards out in front of the blind, and a bearded hen comes up. And so we'd been sitting there for a few hours that morning, and my dad decides, well, we'll go ahead and shoot this bearded hen, have some excitement, harvest a bird.
Yeah.
And so at this time, he had a red dot sight on his shotgun. This was probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I'd imagine. So this is about 20 years ago. So red dots aren't nearly what they are today, what they were back then. I don't even know what the brand of it was. I couldn't tell you. But he pulls up to shoot this hen. Boom! Miss. Miss so bad the hen just stood there. She didn't. She just standing there going about it, doesn't even realize anything. Boom! Hen's still standing there. Nothing. Hen's
wow.
They're relaxing again. I had earmuffs on, so I couldn't hear if some choice words were being said or not, but I'm sure they were. I'll have to ask my dad later.
We better interview Dad.
I think my dad would be real happy to come up and be on the Hunt Nebraska podcast sometime. I'll have to ask him if he wants to. But anyways, reloads for the shirt. Boom! Third shot, and finally in the third shot, the bearded hen realizes she's not dead yet. Realizes. Oh, crap. Somebody's been shooting at me, and proceeds to promptly take off after that. And
screamed like a girl and left.
And, yeah, my dad swore off that day ever putting a red dot sight on his shotgun ever again. Missed 3 times over, I'm assuming over his head. I don't know what happened.
Smokes, yeah.
With over its head, but yeah, I remember it being 3 times. Whether or not it was, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him again later. But I remember it being 3 times he missed that hen with that bearded hen with a red dot on his shotgun, and that's my first turkey hunting memory that I can recall.
Oh, that's awesome!
So it's pretty funny. I love telling that story, and I love telling it even more when he's in the room because just the look, because it gets pretty funny. But
well, and I gotta say, and you guys chime in. Sometimes those first hunts are just as memorable when you have something like that happen, more so than even if you were to harvest a critter. Because I know that I, especially growing up, I was kind of lukewarm. I liked the idea of deer hunting, kind of lukewarm to it compared to some other things. And like I said, because my dad talked me out of it for a year or two. I really got a bug for bird hunting, and I struggled at that because I was cross-eye dominant, right-handed, left-eye dominant before it was popular and before anyone was really looking for that type of thing. And I had to work through that terrible wing shot. But I think some of those early struggles kind of made it more, meaningful when I did find success, and I kind of stuck with it. Turkey hunting being one of those. I struggled for several seasons of even getting a shot at one. Much less harvesting it, and now it's one of my favorite things to chase, especially in the springtime because there's some unique opportunities there, obviously. But still, that deer, first deer, I was excited. Don't get me wrong, I loved eating those inside tenders that we grilled up for impromptu middle of the morning type lunch or late breakfast, I guess you could say. Yeah. Still taste them, still smell them sizzling in the cast iron skillet. But that said, it probably just made me a little bit more, I was excited, but it almost came too easy. I'll put it that way. I mean, I messed everything up there and still ended up with a deer.
Yeah.
And now that's kind of switched. Now that I live a little further away from just super prime deer hunting habitat, I probably like it a little bit more. And I got into archery a little bit more as well. But that's pretty cool. I mean, those are some good stories right there from just our first memories on some of our first hunts. And Julia, you and I have gotten the opportunity to take our kids out as well. Do you remember taking your oldest out for his first hunt?
One of the first ones. I can't remember the first one, but I do remember when he went with me, and the sun was just starting to come up. And in my opinion, it wasn't ready. It wasn't shooting hours yet. But I hunt in a blind for the same reason as you guys don't like to climb up there. Like I I can't get up in a stand. I just can't do it. It can be as sturdy as heck. I don't know, something about it. It just, my knees are shaking and I feel like I'm going to fall out.
You imagine every single different possible way and impossible ways that you can fall out of that tree stand.
So I sit in a blind. Well, it's in a pathway. There's a trail that we know that they walk past. So usually they come out in the morning, or they're going towards the trees in the morning. Well, I had a screen on so they couldn't see us, and I could see a deer starting to walk through. And it was kind of still dark out, in my opinion. And I just remember Kyler, my oldest, still to this day yelling at me, like just couldn't figure out why I did not shoot that buck coming out. It was huge. You could have shot it, but it was those shooting hours yet. And I mean, come to find out, I could have. It was past, but I've yet to tell him.
Yeah,
I've yet to tell him. We're making this no, we're going to follow regulations. Nope. The shooting hours was at this time. We're not there yet. I wasn't going by the hours. I was going by the sun. Well, it was dark because of the screen and we were in a shaded area, but oh yeah, he was just, I think years he still harasses me about not shooting that buck.
Well, let's hope he doesn't hear this episode then and find out the truth.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, boy. Now, it wasn't their first time, but I remember dragging my two kids, got a son and a daughter, out goose hunting. And we borrowed, we had 2 layout blinds, borrowed the third, and they were small enough, at least we thought, as it was a good idea at the time, to toss them into that third layout blind together. They fit physically, folks. That was not a problem. But what we didn't really take into account is how brothers and sisters act when they're that close together and having to play and kill time and all that stuff. But it was fun on a lot of accounts. It was one of our first field hunts together as a family. We'd just moved here to Nebraska not too long before that. And we went out, we got the decoy set, but they just absolutely had a riot setting out the decoys and camouflaging the blind a little bit and all that stuff. And then we're just getting to that beautiful, the hawking hours, or now that we're around Halloween time, we can call them the witching hours, just before, it's not light, but it's getting grayer.
Yeah.
You can see it a little bit better. We drove at that time, the old Chevy Blazer out of the field to the access, and then we were walking back in. Now, it was a couple 100 yards from where we parked, at least, to where the blinds were and the decoys and all that stuff. As we took like our first 10 steps, within the first few feet away from that vehicle, we hear a honk. And now my wife is a serious goose hunter, and I can't remember. I think she had a hold of Logan's hand at that time. And in the next 200 and some yards, I think Logan got like 3 steps in. Leslie was off. She just grabbed his hand and took off and dove into the blinds. Now, we never saw those birds. We never saw what made that sound, but Em and I came strolling up leisurely afterwards and say, all right, we hustled, but you can only make a 2-year-old hustle so much.
Yeah. And, or 6-year-old.
We tossed them in there, and it was just, they'd play together nicely for a while, and then they'd start being brother and sister and yelling at each other. Calm down, go. We might, like,
you shut up, you shut up, you shut up. No, you shut up.
And we finally realized at one point that they'd probably both fallen asleep because we hadn't heard anything from the blind in like 5-10 minutes. And they just fell asleep because you're laying back and all that, and kind of covered up nice and warm. It was early season. But it was great. We didn't have the geese. They did, for some reason, we had 30, 40 geese in there, which is not a lot for a field hunt, but early in the season we were taking it. And they didn't show up. We had a pair show up. And they heard the fight going on in that middle blind, and they short stopped us by 100 yards, so not even within range. They kind of eyeballed us and looked at each other and just like, there's other cornfields, we're out here.
There's something going on over there.
Took off. But the one thing that I'll remember is Leslie and I thought, man, that was just, it didn't work. We were out there for a good chunk of the day. All we had were 2 that even circled around that we heard that we could work, and they short stopped and they weren't having any of them and disappeared and this and that. Now we got to pick all this stuff up. But my kids put it in perspective as they were helping picking up, and they were excited and all that side. Oh. And one of my kids said, man, can we do this again? This is like the best day ever. This is great. And at that moment I realized, well, again, it doesn't necessarily go back to having to shoot something or even shoot at something to make it memorable and exciting. And they still kind of talk about that now that we've had some successful goose hunts. we found out early on that the old layout blind and putting those two together wasn't going to work. So we've had other situations. But
where you're like, okay, yep, you guys can go with Mom. I'm going to that cornfield. Go pond. I'll be over there.
There was a squirrel hunt too where I could follow Leslie and Logan around just by how many questions Logan kept asking Mom, and how Mom just started getting more. Her answer started getting shorter but louder for some reason. But I could follow the whole because we sat down and weren't seeing anything. And all of a sudden, just like, well, if we move around, maybe you'll see some moving around, because we knew there were squirrels in there. And so off they went. And I can remember hearing some of that first question. Why do they call them fox squirrel? I think they should call them raccoon squirrel. They climb around. They eat some of the same stuff. They got a bushy tail like a raccoon. And Leslie's like, I don't know. I don't know why. Why do you think they call them fox squirrel? And it just, the whole conversation for the next 40 minutes was about raccoon squirrels.
Raccoon squirrels.
Raccoon squirrels. He had some good points, but I don't think Mom was having any of it at that point.
Don't imagine
Foxes
so.
can't climb trees. But anyhow, well, folks, if you got some good memories of your first time out in the field, whether it was you yourself or one of your loved ones, we'd love to hear about, because that's what brings us all together, and some of that common threads that bind us as a group and a family, if I say that. So we're just getting into that time now. Make sure you're safe out there and enjoying the great out of doors as we get into more and more of those hunting seasons, those magic times we call the deer rut and all that type of stuff. So for Julia, Michael, and me, Hershey, I guess we'll see you in the great outdoors.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.